Dr. Baba, if you'd start the recording, thank you. Okay, happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for being here today. This is the second webinar in our series on student engagement this fall. I am Dr. Allison Boyer. I am the Senior Faculty Development Specialist with DSI. And I'm excited to continue talking with everybody about some low effort, low stakes student engagement strategies that we can use. The first session in this series focused on the key principles of effective student engagement and active learning in the classroom. And today we're going to focus in on some really specific strategies for individual students, for small groups of students or pairs, and then for the whole class. Things that can be used in the face-to-face class, things that can be used in the online class, both synchronous and asynchronous. Things that are easy to implement, that take little time and little effort to prepare and execute. They don't necessarily take a lot of time out of your class either. Some of them will probably be familiar to a lot of you, and hopefully there will be some new strategies as well. And we'll try a few of them along the way over the course of the next hour. But I want to give you a heads up, okay? Hang on to your hat, because we're going to go through approximately 40 different strategies in this session. But don't panic, don't worry, you're going to get a handout after the session is over with a complete list of all of the strategies along with additional resources, okay? So let's get started, shall we? So we are going to start by trying out something called automatic writing to get warmed up. So this is a strategy, Peter Elbow calls it free writing. For those of you who are in English and writing disciplines, you may be familiar with his work. So for the next minute, I'd like for you to respond to the question in writing. So you can open up a Word document, you can take out a sheet of paper, whatever you like, and write a response to this question. Why are you here at this session today? I want you to write for the full minute, never stop writing. Don't worry about spelling, grammar, punctuation, complete sentences. And if you can't think of what to say or write, just write, I don't know what to say, until something else comes out, okay? So just write whatever is in your head. And I have a little timer for us. So here we go. We're gonna write for 1 minute. Twenty seconds left. Five seconds. Keep writing. All right. So what are some of the things that you wrote about or ideas that you generated in response to this question? If you're willing to share, you can pop some of that into the chat. Or if you want to unmute, you can do that as well. So why are you here at this session today? New ideas to make teaching fun and engaging. That's great. Fresh ideas, prevent getting stale. Love that, remembering old ideas. As an educator, it is my moral obligation to help each student. Thank you, Subrad. Adapt my teaching style to be more in line with what students expect. Nice. Okay, so now let's get meta for a second. What was this exercise like for you as you were doing it? to write for 1 solid minute without stopping? Again, put it in the chat or unmute. Fun, don't have to think. Great. What else? What was it like for you to do this? Low pressure, yes. A little challenging, yes. I'm someone who likes to self-edit as I write, so sometimes this is challenging for me too. No obligation to be correct. Byron wanted more time. I know 1 minute can feel really fast, especially when you get on a roll, but that's kind of the point, right? It just kind of gets those juices flowing. Yeah, no worries about getting things right or wrong or having like a really great idea. You're just kind of pouring things onto the page. So as you all are already starting to pick up, the idea behind automatic writing is to write for the time allotted. You're not going to self-edit. And it's not to generate something perfect or worth publishing. It's simply to generate ideas without worrying about being right or wrong, right? So ideally, if we do this with our students, they might start to dig deeper, they might start to make some connections, create some original thought, or even generate ideas that they didn't know they had, right? So through this exercise, our students can kind of get their thoughts flowing. They might be surprised at what they generate, and can be a great way to kind of warm up the class, or like we're using it here, or maybe prepare for a group discussion or a project they're about to work on. So there are a lot of different uses for it, but as you can see, 1 minute, that's all it took. So before we really dive into more strategies, I just wanted to take a minute to look at what is kind of a checklist for ensuring that any engagement activities that we use have the desired impact. And so for those of you who came to the first session in the series, this is a little bit of an overview. For those of you who weren't able to come to that workshop or would like to learn more about it, you can actually access it on our new YouTube channel. So I put a link to that in the chat for you. So the checklist for you here, first, we want an activity to engage students in the construction of meaning in some way. So it should go beyond simple transmission of knowledge. Maybe they're linking new information to old information or generating new ideas in some way, thinking about their understanding of a concept. We also want to make sure our activities are aligning with learning objectives. That's probably an obvious one, but it's really important. We want to make that clear to our students as well, so that they know there's a reason behind everything that we do, and so that it doesn't feel like busy work to them. It's always important if we can make our strategies relevant to students' concerns. This is always beneficial. This is a key component of adult learning theory. You want to make sure it's relevant to the learning objectives, to maybe a project they're going to complete, or something going on with the course content, right? If we can relate it to real life situations, that is also helpful. And then finally, strive to get students to reflect on what they just did, right? Write on what they learned, reflect on the meaning of the activity. Essentially, you want to take time to close the loop if you can, okay? So, are you ready to dive in? Here we go. So first I want to start by looking at some easy strategies that students can do individually. So here are a few that are great for face-to-face classes, but really you can adapt them for online classes too. I'm going to start with short writes. We just did one, right? Automatic writing is an example, but there are a lot of other different opportunities, and they're super easy to integrate in the classroom. And yes, you can even do these in STEM classes, even if writing isn't something that you do all of the time during class. A few options here. Exit tickets you may have heard of before. An exit ticket is essentially a student's ticket out the door, right? They're often assigned at the end of class. They require students to maybe demonstrate something that they learned, or identify the most important point of the day or of the lesson, or maybe what we call, or what I call, the muddiest point, or maybe the one thing that they're still struggling to understand. You could do something like ask them to provide a quick summary of what they learned today. It can take all different kinds of forms. This is also a great opportunity for you to do a little bit of formative assessment and figure out where students are in their learning. So did they get what you wanted them to get from that lesson? Another strategy that offers a little bit more structure is the 3-2-1 short write. This can help students structure their responses to maybe a text or a film or a concept that you're covering in class. So the 3 is asking students to identify 3 takeaways from the lesson. The 2 is to generate 2 questions about the content. And then 1 is one thing that they enjoyed. So again, you can adapt that for all kinds of concepts or activities. It's great if you're teaching a literature class or something like that, but again, super adaptable. Journaling is another really great, easy thing to do. It's something that I've done with my own students as kind of a start for every single class period. It could be a practice that they engage in every day or every week. At the start or the end of a class or outside of class to reflect on their learning. It could be responding to a text. It could be responding to a prompt that you give them that asks them to make connections to the material. And again, a way to kind of just get things going in class and get them engaged in what's about to happen, right? Kind of turn on their brains. Learning audits come from Stephen Brookfield. You may be familiar with some of his work in the field of teaching and learning. And learning audits are basically asking students to summarize what they've learned, identify what the most important things are, articulate what they've learned since this class, or maybe in the last module, or over the course of the week. Again, maybe any questions that they have. A great strategy for, again, formative assessment. And then, of course, free writing, automatic writing, what we just did. A background knowledge probe is another great strategy where essentially it works great as a warm-up activity or in the middle of a class. Basically, you ask students, tell me what you know about this, or what do you think about this, or what do you feel about this? Again, great way to get them started thinking about a topic. It can help you identify maybe where they are, where their current knowledge is about a new topic that you're starting. Can help you identify additional points for discussion. Another variation on this that I really like is maybe to provide students with 10 to 15 statements about the course content that might include commonly held misconceptions about the course content, and then ask them to respond, is it true or is it false? You can turn it into a competition too, which is sometimes really fun for students. But again, a great way as kind of a diagnostic activity for students that's super low stakes, right? You can also tap into some of the affective pieces of learning. So how do they feel about something? Are there certain emotional responses that the topic might stir up for them? Another super easy strategy is the pause procedure, or you might hear that called the note check. This is a very powerful activity. There's research behind this that shows its impact. And essentially, you pause for 2 minutes in the middle of a lecture or an activity and ask students to review the notes they've taken so far. To identify gaps in their learning or something they didn't quite catch that they can ask questions about. It can also be great to have students pair up and compare their notes and figure out where they align or misalign. And then this gives them the opportunity to kind of reflect on the information and ask any questions that they have. It can also help them become better note takers, which is really important when it comes to their learning as well. And I could geek out about note taking for another hour, but I'm going to save that for another time. And then lastly here, we have something called cognitive wrappers, or it could be an exam wrapper or an assignment wrapper or something like that. This is a really great strategy for encouraging metacognition in our students. So essentially, they're short activities, a series of questions or prompts that ask students to review their performance or their instructor's feedback on an assignment with an eye towards adapting it towards future learning, right? So you might ask questions like, how did you prepare for this exam? What kind of errors did you make on this assignment or on this exam? What could you do differently next time to complete this assignment or prepare for the next exam, etc. So this can help students move beyond just focusing on the grade, but focus on how I'm going to do better, right? How am I going to develop as a learner? And help them think about how they prepare for the kinds of activities that you're doing in class or the assessments that you're doing. Oh, one more, graphic organizers. So these are visual learning tools that can help students organize their ideas during or after class. They can help clarify or simplify complex concepts. They can be used to plan research or brainstorm, or just simply for taking notes. But they help students organize things in a visual way that can make things more accessible to a larger variety of learners. So here are just a few examples of graphic organizers. T-charts, sequence charts, concept maps, Venn diagrams. You can develop your own as well. And in the handout that that will be provided to you after this workshop, there's several links to sources that provide templates for different kinds of graphic organizers that you can access, as well as an example that I created that you can see. So be on the lookout for that handout after our session today. So let's think about some strategies for individual students in online classes. Again, some of the ones we talked about, you can still do in online classes, but here are some that are specific. So if you're teaching synchronous classes or meetings, Zoom polls are always great. You can do those in Teams as well. Chat storms are really fun, and basically all that means is you ask students to drop answers in the chat. It could be all at once or in a certain sequence as a way to check their understanding or spark interest. So one example might be something simple like drop one word in the chat that summarizes today's topic. Simple, again, but a great way to start getting them engaged. Emoji check-ins are really fun. You might ask students to respond to a topic or a question with a simple emoji that reflects their understanding or mood about a topic. So for instance, I might ask you to give me a thumbs up in the chat or use the thumbs up reaction tool in Zoom to tell me how you're doing. Are you with me? Are you not? And if you do it that way, it can be anonymous. Another strategy that I use all the time, and in fact we're going to use in this session in just a little bit, are shared documents. So like a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word document in OneDrive that you make editable for everybody in the class can be used for idea sharing, brainstorming, real-time discussion, summaries, things like that. So if you are teaching an asynchronous online class, like I'm sure many of you are, here are a few ideas for that. Microjournaling, I think, is a fun one where you might ask students to submit a weekly minute paper. So, maybe just a few sentences reflecting on what they learned or what they struggled with. So it's kind of an adaptation of that Muddiest Point activity that I mentioned previously. Padlet walls are great. This is an online platform that you can use. Don't worry, there's a link on the handout if you've never used it before. This creates a shared space like a wall, right? Where students can post ideas, questions, images, or things like that. They can respond to each other. They can ask discussion questions. It's a great way to kind of accumulate shared resources or reactions to something. Padlet is super fun if you've never used it before. I like this idea of goal setting prompts for an online class. So for instance, you might ask all of your students to identify a goal for a certain module or a unit, and then ask them to revisit that and reflect on whether they accomplished that goal at the end of a module. Multimedia reflections or tutorials, excuse me. Maybe you ask students to create short 1-minute videos where they explain a concept for other students in their class, right? So they kind of learn by teaching other students, right? Annotation assignments can be really great. You can use there are software tools out there available like Perusall or Hypothesis where you can upload certain texts or books on student. It's kind of a social networking annotation tool. One caveat about these tools is that they may have accessibility issues, so that's something to be aware of. And then finally, curated resource sharing, where students are maybe responsible for finding one resource about a topic, an article, a video, a podcast. And Jill, I see your question in the chat. Don't worry, again, you're going to get a handout after this workshop that is going to list all of these strategies and all of the tools with links, okay? So curated resource sharing. So you have students kind of come together and share resources with one another. And then you have this really great helpful document that all of the students can work with later. Okay, how are we doing? Thumbs up, thumbs down? You hanging in there with me? I take your silence as a quiet acknowledgement that you're doing well. Thank you, Baba. Okay, we're gonna keep going. Okay, so now let's transition to some strategies for pairs or small groups. And these are things that work for face-to-face or online classes with some adaptation, okay? All right, the good old pair share. You are probably familiar with this. If you're not, it's super easy. I use it all the time in my teaching, and it is as simple as it sounds, right? You give students a prompt, a question, you ask them to think about it on their own for maybe a minute, then you ask them to discuss it in pairs. So this gives them an opportunity to kind of practice their responses with each other and get some feedback. And then you ask those pairs or groups to share out with the rest of the class, and then that can help spur some discussion, right? That short opportunity just to practice with one person can make a world of difference in helping students feel more comfortable than sharing with the rest of the class, because they've kind of already gotten some affirmation and they've practiced things a little bit in their head, right? That can make a pair share really powerful, and it only takes a few minutes. You can even have them do things like review each other's homework or something like that and give each other feedback. Another favorite strategy of mine is, of course, the tried and true structured small group discussion. Obviously, a relative of the pair share, where you might pose more than one question or more than one activity for students to complete in groups. Again, this doesn't have to take very long. Some tips that I will give you for this is make sure you give them a framework, right? Don't just say, okay, everybody get into a group and discuss this. Not going to go well. You need to give them some specific questions to respond to, provide them with some structure, and then let them know that they're going to that they should be prepared to share out or maybe turn in their responses or something. But this also gives you a great opportunity to kind of pop in with them and get more one-on-one time with them in small groups. So that's another reason that I really love this. And collaboration like that helps build community in the classroom, which is really important for student learning. Obviously, strategies like application, problem solving, case studies that they can work on in groups, gets to that relevance piece and that real world piece that we talked about in the checklist earlier. So those are always great. I already mentioned concept mapping as a way for students to start reflecting on how different concepts work together or have relationships with one another. That's obviously something that they can do on their own, but having them do it together or in a small group, I think can also be really meaningful because again, they share their ideas with each other and kind of learn together on that. Peer reviews, another favorite of mine as a writing professor. If students are able to reflect on another student's work and give feedback, that will hopefully help them reflect on their own work in a more critical way. But just like the structured small group discussion, you have to provide them with structure, or else you're probably going to get very surface level feedback from your students like, oh, this sounds good, or work on that. You've got to give them specific questions and a framework, okay? What size group do you feel works best, Sophie asks. That's a really good question. There are some discrepancies in the research, but I think most research coalesces around groups of 3 or 4 at most, because if they're bigger than that, it's easy for some students to just kind of sit out and not participate. But if you have at least 3, then you get a bigger variety of viewpoints or perspectives, which is also really beneficial. Barbara asks, how can you structure concept mapping and collaborative note-taking in online or face-to-face classes? Well, for online classes, if it's something you want them to do in groups, you can use different software. There are different platforms that you can give them. There will be resources for this on the handout that that we send to you after the workshop. Zoom Whiteboard is one that you can use if you want the group to work together. You could use even something like Google Slides. There are also some AI tools that can help with concept mapping. So there are a lot of different ways that you can approach that. Let's see, Samantha asked, how do you get students to critique each other? Most of the time, they always find positive things. Yeah, absolutely. That's why the framework is so important. I usually give my students very clear parameters. It sounds like what your professor does as well. So tell them to find at least one thing, one piece of constructive criticism to give them. I usually ask my students to provide details so that they're not just saying things like work on your intro paragraph, but to be really specific, like what's missing? Is there evidence that's missing, or examples that could be more helpful? The idea is really being specific with them, and I give them specific prompts that they need to respond to. And also maybe do a little pre-work with them about the kinds of feedback that are useful. I usually do that as well. Thanks, Eleanor. She provides some good advice as well. Yeah, specificity is key, I gotta tell you. Okay, peer interviews. So that's where you might, this is something super quick and fun that could work even at the start of a semester, where you ask students to interview each other about a topic, and then they have to summarize what the other person said, which again kind of makes it a little bit lower stakes for people who might be shyer about sharing some of their ideas to the rest of the class. And then a concept explanation swap, I think, is a really fun idea, where you have students explain a concept to their partner in person or in writing or via a video, an asynchronous video perhaps, or in breakout rooms if you're in a live Zoom like we are. And then they have a conversation about it with each other. Okay. What are you doing? Doing okay? Checking in. I know I'm talking a lot. It's not my favorite thing to do, but we got a lot of strategies to get through. So I'm going to keep going. Okay. Oh, Misty says she does peer interviews on day one. They go well. Great. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Misty. Okay. We're going to shift again and transition to strategies that you might do with the whole class participating together in some way. Right pass. This is one of my favorite things to do in a face-to-face class for sure, because it can be really fun and energetic. So like some of the other strategies, this encourages students to participate without some of the social pressure to kind of speak up about their own ideas in class, but then their ideas still get shared with other students. So basically what I usually do is I have my students take out a sheet of paper, I give them a question to respond to about what they learned or their thoughts on a particular discussion question. It could be really anything. Have them write that response down on the piece of paper, then they're going to pass it to another student. And then the next student is going to read it. They might respond to it in some way or add to it, or maybe not. You could be very organized about this and have them pass it just like to the next person sitting next to them. I usually like to have them pass it a few times because that makes it more anonymous. I also like to do it in a slightly more chaotic way where I have all the students get up and just start randomly passing pieces of paper to each other. So they really don't know where their responses ended up. And then I ask them to read the paper they ended up with, doesn't matter whose it is, and if they have an answer on the sheet of paper that they think is really interesting or insightful, then they share it with the rest of the class. And that's really fun because it's low stakes for the person sharing because it is not their idea. And the person whose idea it is quietly knows that it's theirs and they get a little boost. And I have to say, like, it is a little chaotic, but it's really fun to watch the students kind of walk around the classroom and share things and they start laughing a little bit. So it kind of re-energizes them too. There are ways that you can do this in an online class as well. If it's a synchronous class, you could create a shared document with several pages, and then they kind of pass the document, or they pass their ideas by moving from one document to the next, or it could be different Google Slides or something that they move through. Or they could be moving from one breakout room to the next where they pick which breakout room they get to. That is an option in Zoom. If it's an asynchronous class, you could create a shared document and assign kind of a rotating schedule for responses. So maybe day one, group A writes their responses. And then on day two, group B reads those responses and responds. And then on day three, group C reads them, responds, adds a new perspective, asks other questions, things like that. So there are a lot of different variations on this one, but I think it's super fun. Okay, another one that I really like is focused listing or group brainstorming. It's incredibly easy for the entire class, in person or online. Can serve as a great review activity after a unit or a good brainstorming activity before a unit, kind of like the group brainstorming that I mentioned earlier. So basically, you ask students to brainstorm or list as many ideas or concepts as they can around a topic within a kind of limited amount of time. So you want them to kind of work quickly and just come up with as many ideas as possible. And then in-person class, obviously you can write things on the board or have students come and write things on the board. In an online class, this could be a shared document, like I mentioned earlier. This doesn't need to take any longer than a few minutes, but it gets students engaged and thinking about the material. So guess what, y'all? We're going to do that right now. We're going to try it ourselves. So I have created a shared document. You can follow the QR code here. Tama has also put the link in the chat for you. So we are going to take just 2 minutes, and I want you to go to this document, pick a row, any row, and write down what is everything you know and understand about student engagement and active learning right now. Can be whatever, anything you think of. Let's add it to the document. Here we go, 2 minutes, starting now. And some good things already. Students' brains need to be activated. Cannot engage successfully without planning. Variety. Low stakes. Students do better. Retention increases. Nice. Sure and specificity. Excellent. Arranging the environment. Most students come in with histories of punishment for speaking out. Ooh, that's a good one. Not just textual responses, but also vocal or verbal. Yes. Tailored approaches for different classes, online versus face-to-face. Love that. Be small groups, large groups, anonymous. All right, we've got about 30 seconds left. Let's see, think, pair, share. Funds of knowledge, what do they already know? Awesome. Collaboration, peer confirmation encourages them to stay on track. Low stakes, really good, really good. Okay, 2 minutes are up, y'all. So, I'm gonna ask you again, let's get meta. What did that feel like for you as a student to do? What did that feel like for you? Again, pop some ideas into the chat. Yes, no pressure. Felt easier this time. Great, thanks, Michael. Anything else? Any other experiences or feelings? It was fun, good. Anonymity helps willingness to engage, absolutely, yes. Thanks for the praise. Yes, praise goes a long way, y'all. Students like to know when they're doing something well. It was hard to think on the spot. That's a good thing to note. Misty says, felt like I was contributing. Nice. I wanted to see what animal I would be. Yeah, I agree. How did I create this document? Samantha, this is just a Google Doc that I edit, that I make sure the sharing is set to editing so that everybody can edit, and then I share the link. It is as easy as that. So people don't have to log in. That keeps it anonymous. So great. And you also get the opportunity to review what everybody else is writing, right? So a lot of opportunities here for students to share ideas in a really easy, low pressure way. But also, again, kind of activate their brains around the topic. Okay, we're going to keep going. More easy strategies for the entire class. Live polling is a great one. We already talked about Zoom polling earlier, but you can also do this in the face-to-face classroom or the synchronous online classroom, obviously. There are all different kinds of platforms you can use for this. There's Poll Everywhere. You can use a Google form or a Microsoft form. If you're in person in the class, you could do something easy like thumbs up or thumbs down about a question. They can use colored paper or note cards to represent different multiple choice options like A, B, C, or D, or red is A, blue is B, so on and so forth. There's another really cool thing that you can use in the face-to-face classroom called Plickers. Some of you may have used this before. It's been around for a while, but it is a way that you can collect instant multiple choice student responses from students without requiring them to have clickers or note cards or things like that. And you can just, so this image here is an example of what a Plickr card looks like. So you can see there's A, B, C, and D on each side of this weird shape. And for students to respond, they just move it so that what their answer is at the top. And then you have an app on your phone where you can scan the room and it collects their responses. And these cards are sufficiently weird looking that students can't really see what can't really process what other people are responding, and you get that instant feedback. And I've used it before, and it's really easy to use and really fun. And I think you can integrate it with PowerPoint. I'm pretty sure I've done that before. Again, links to all of these will be on your handout, so do not panic. Games are always fun. Face-to-face, synchronous, y'all know students love Jeopardy. That can be a great way to review things. Gamification is fun. Students like to compete sometimes. I have definitely seen that in my classes. I've done relays in my face-to-face class for like 1 bonus point. That means virtually nothing for their final grade, but wow, they got really competitive about it and really into it. So that's always a really fun way to go. There are some links on your handout that will take you to some other resources about this as well. Speed sharing is a fun idea. It's kind of like speed dating. So it works well in a face-to-face or a synchronous class where they might rotate through partners or rotate through breakout rooms to share ideas with each other, again, for maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes at a time. It can get their energy going and they get to be exposed to a bunch of different ideas. Group wikis or glossaries, I think are really interesting and fun, where students contribute to a shared resource. So it's kind of like that curated resources strategy I mentioned earlier. But here, maybe they're adding their own definitions about certain concepts or terms in your discipline or for a particular module. But again, it kind of gets them integrated with each other and engaging with the content. Debates are always fun. Obviously, you can do those in a face-to-face or synchronous class, but you can also do them in an asynchronous class by using discussion threads. So maybe you assign students to groups, the for or against, for instance, take opposing sides on a topic, and they post arguments and rebuttals in a structured way in a discussion thread in an asynchronous class. And then there's a gallery walk, which I use all the time, and I think it's really fun. This is a fun strategy that gets students up and out of their seats in a face-to-face classroom. And there's some different strategies that you can implement. So one strategy is to, again, pose a question to students and ask them to write their responses on a Post-it. That's how I've done it before. But you could also have like flip charts or something in the in-person classroom. They stick them to the wall, they stick them to the chalkboard, and then you have students walk around the room and review everybody's responses. And what I usually like to do is to have them then move the Post-its around according to themes that they're seeing in the responses. So they kind of clump Post-its together. This also works in an online class. So guess what, y'all? We're gonna do one right now. Oh wait, before we do that, I see Eleanor has posted a question in the chat. In my asynchronous class, most students do the work right before it is due. Is the trick to having discussion, debate, is to have deadlines? Yes, deadlines are key in an asynchronous class. So it might be that you need group 1 to post their initial assertion by this day, by Monday or Tuesday, and then You need the rebuttals from group B to show up by Wednesday or Thursday. Yeah. Okay, let's try a virtual gallery walk. So for this activity, I want you to think of a student engagement strategy that you've tried, or if you've never tried one, like maybe if you're not teaching currently or you've never used one before, maybe one that you've seen or experienced as a student that were flops. What made it a flop? So something that just didn't go as planned. Okay, so I'm going to open a Zoom whiteboard in a minute, and I'm going to ask you to click on the icon that it looks like a little Post-it. Okay, so here's an example, and write your answers down there, and stick your sticky onto the Zoom whiteboard. Okay, and I want you to review the sticky notes posted by your colleagues. And then I'm probably going to ask, because we have quite a few people in here, I'm going to ask for maybe a volunteer or two to be someone who clumps them thematically. Okay? So this means I need to stop sharing the PowerPoint, and I am going to open a whiteboard. Here we go. Okay, so here is the whiteboard. Find the little sticky note right here and start adding your thoughts to the whiteboard. You can also use shapes. We tested it out the other day, and you can see you can put a little heart there and put your text in there too if you want. And you can change the colors of your sticky notes. So one strategy for clumping them might be to move them around, because you can move the sticky notes around like this. Or we could even use color coding and put all of the ones in a certain theme. We can make them purple, and another theme we can make them blue. So we're going to take a minute. Change the sizes of the sticky notes too. Let's see what we have in here. We have iClickers where students had some technical difficulties. I had to have students place students with different disabilities into the correct order on life impact with 100 students, so it was a little chaotic, okay? Putting students into groups to share questions they have about lecture material, okay? Choral responding. Each concept, and then have students read an example and answer as a group. No one says anything. Been there. It flopped because I didn't hold a contingency. Switched over to thumbs up, thumbs down. Great. So debating in teams, paired discussions, discussion about a reading. Let's see what we have. Ask online students to work in a team. They fight. Okay, so is anybody willing to volunteer to be the thematic clumper for our whiteboard? Anybody? Ding. Y'all are tough.
I'm so sorry, I would offer, but I had to switch to cell phone mode and drive to pick up my
No
daughter from school.
worries. No worries, Samantha. I had a feeling you might be someone who would volunteer. Okay, I'll be the person. I'll be the person and I will clump. Okay, so let's see. We have technical difficulties. We have maybe a little bit too much chaos. Here we have students who didn't want to say anything. Getting students to form groups to do analysis. So we're not sure why that failed. Tried recreating some experiments I had read in journals. That didn't work well. Let's see. Ellie says, I have dogs yelling at me, but one theme I see is a lot of discussion activities and not as much hands-on. Oh, that's a really good observation, Kelly. Thank you. So it might be some problems are, maybe getting students to do things more hands-on. We have some things about discussion that we could clump together here, right? Put those together. Recreating experiments, maybe that's a technology issue that didn't work. I'm just guessing here. Having students form groups. So we have some issues, maybe with groups in general. Voluntary discussion boards without participation. So I would put that up here. So you get the idea, right? You see how this is working. I've done this before on the first day of class with first semester freshmen where I ask them to share what are they worried about in the class? Like what are some concepts that they're worried about and concepts they're excited about? And I have found that to be really empowering for students because they see that other students are, maybe struggling with the same things that they're worried about, and it's very easy for them to respond. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. There we go. Can y'all see the slides again? Thanks. Okay, so we're going to keep going. Now, I would be remiss if I did not include a few AI enhanced strategies because it's 2025 and everybody's talking about AI, and I actually facilitate the GATE Institute about generative AI in teaching. So here are a few AI enhanced strategies that you could use in the classroom. Analysis of AI generated explanations, where maybe you ask students to use an AI tool, yes, give them permission to do it, like ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot, to generate a summary or explanation of a particular concept that you all are studying in class. And then you have them critique or revise it and figure out flaws with it or things that are missing or things that are correct in it. So for example, ask an AI to explain cognitive dissonance, right? What does it get right? What does it get wrong? Easy example there. Another strategy, AI-assisted writing and revision plus analysis. Again, analysis is key here. So maybe you have students bring in something they've written or write something in class and then ask an AI tool to suggest improvements on it. And then they have to review those suggestions and reflect on suggestions that they would accept or suggestions that they would reject and why. This one I think is really fun, AI concept visualization. You could have students use AI tools to generate visual representations of complex ideas. So it could be maybe an infographic or a diagram or even something more artistic than that, like a visualization of a character in a book based on descriptions or visualize their thoughts or feelings about a topic. There are all different kinds of ways that this could go. And then use that to spur discussion or reflect on what it got right and wrong, etc. This one, I think, is a fabulous use of AI, using it for role play or simulation, where students can interact with AI maybe as a simulated historical figure or an expert on the topic or a stakeholder in a particular problem they're trying to solve. I've heard of instructors having students use them for kind of to play like a devil's advocate, to have them generate rebuttals for counter arguments in a writing class. So again, all different kind of cool ways that you could do this. And then another really important one, AI fact-checking challenge. They might ask AI a question related to course content, and then their job is to fact check it. And this is important because it communicates to them that AI is not always right, and it requires critical analysis. So we have reached the end. We've already talked about the FOPs. So this is an example of a cognitive wrapper. If we had a little bit more time, I would probably ask you to reflect on some of these questions. So things like, what are 2 or 3 useful ideas you're taking away from the session? What's a topic you typically teach that you would like to make more engaging? What's a strategy from today's session that you could implement around that topic? What kind of motivation did you bring to the session today? What are some next steps that you could use? So if you have some ideas, I'd love to see them in the chat. But this example will also be provided to you on the handout that you're going to receive. Okay. So you can see an example, but there will also be links to other templates that you can download. Whew. Okay, y'all. We made it through that marathon. We legitimately covered around 40 different strategies. So hopefully there's at least 1 or 2 that you can implement. So what questions do you have? I'd love to hear them from you. I also, before we wrap up, I want to make you aware we still have several more workshops available from the DSI faculty development team this fall. Here's the list of them. You can access them through this QR code or by going to our website, which I'll put in the chat for you here. And also, one more reminder, check us out on YouTube. There are some recordings of our recent webinars. If maybe you missed them, you can go there and view them as well. So we have 1 minute left. Thank you all for being here today. I am going to go drink some water because I have just done a whole lot of talking. If you have any questions, I'm going to stick around. I'm glad to chat more with you. And yes, Jennifer, the handout's going to be emailed to you, probably either sometime today or on Monday. So you will get all kinds of references and resources if you want to explore anything more. Also, feel free to reach out to me via email if you have any other questions. So happy Friday. Thanks for being here today and have an amazing weekend.